It does everything it can to strengthen the bedrock layer of covenants. The MAID program, by constraint, actively subverts them. It has led to a mother to plead with the doctor not to end her son's life. It has left the man enraged, feeling that he and his other family members were shut out of the process that led to the killing of his brother. The state, seeing people only as autonomous individuals, didn't adequately recognize family bonds. We now live in societies in which more and more people are deciding that death is better than life. Families have traditionally been built around mutual burdens. As children, we are burdens on our families. In adulthood, especially in hard times, we can be burdens on one another. And in old age, we may be burdens once again. When these bonds have become attenuated or broken in Western cultures, many people recreate webs of obligation in chosen families. There too, it is the burdening that makes the bond secure. I recently had a conversation with a Canadian friend who told me that he and his 3 siblings had not been particularly close as adults. Then their aging dad grew gravely ill. His care became a burden they all shared, and that shared burden brought them closer. Their father died, but their closeness remains. Their father bestowed many gifts upon his children, but the final one was a gift of being a burden on his family. Autonomy-based liberalism imposes unrealistic expectations. Each individual is supposed to define their own values, their own choices. Each individual, in their words of Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy in Planned Parenthood versus Casey, is left to come up with their own concept of existence, of the meaning of the universe, and the mystery of human life. If your name is Aristotle, maybe you can do that. Most of us can't. Most of us are left in a moral vacuum, a world in which the meaning of life is unclear, unconnected to any moral horizon outside of itself. Autonomy-based liberalism cuts people off from all forces that formed them, stretching back to centuries, and from all the centuries stretching into the future. Autonomy-based liberalism leaves people alone. Its emphasis on individual sovereignty inevitably erodes the bonds between people. Autonomy-based liberalism induces even progressives to live out the sentence notoriously associated with Margaret Thatcher. There is no such thing as a society. Nearly 200 years ago, Alex de Tocqueville feared that this state of affairs not only makes men forget their ancestors, but also clouds their view of their descendants and isolates them from their contemporaries. Each man is forever thrown back upon himself alone, and there is a danger he may be shut up in a solitude of his own heart. As Emily Durkheim pointed out in 1897, this is pretty much a perfect recipe for suicide. We now live in societies in which more and more people are deciding that death is better than life. In short, autonomy-based liberalism produces a kind of isolated, adrift people who are prone to suicide, and then provides them with a state-assisted solution to the problem it created in the first place. Gifts-based liberals, by contrast, gives you membership in the procession that stretches back to your ancestors. It connects you to those who migrated to this place or that, married this person or that, raised their children in this way or that. What you are is an expression of history. This long procession, though filled with struggles and hardships, has made has made life sweeter for us. Human beings once lived in societies in which slavery was a foundational fact of life. Beheadings and animal torture were popular, entrapments, raping and pillaging were routine, but gradually, with many setbacks, we've built a culture on which people are more likely to abhor cruelty, a culture that has been an ideal, the notion that all people deserve fair treatment, not just our kind of people. This progress, thanks to this procession, each generation doesn't have to make the big decisions of life standing on naked ground. We have been bequeathed sets of values, institutions, cultural traditions that embody the accumulated wisdom of our kind. The purpose of life in a gifts-based world is to participate in the procession, to keep the march of progress going along its fitful course. We may give with our creativity, with our talents, with our care, but many of the gifts people transmit derive from deeper sources. A few years ago, the historian Wildreth Maclay wrote in an essay about his mother, a mathematician, in a Hedgehog review, the day he mentioned to her that H.L. Mencken had suffered a stroke late in life that left him unable to read or write and nearly unable to speak. His mother coolly remarked that if much a fate ever befell her, he should not prolong her life without a certain quality of life. She observed, there's no point in living. Sometimes the old and the infirm, those who have been wounded by life and those choices have been constrained, reveal what is most important in life. A couple of years later, she suffered a near fatal stroke that left her unable to speak. She cried the most intense sobs of grief Maclay had ever heard. It might have appeared that her life was no longer worth living, but Maclay observed something closer to the opposite was true. An inner development took place that made her a far deeper, warmer, more affectionate, more grateful, and more generous person than I had known her to be, or ever known her to be. Eventually, Maclay's mother moved in with his family. It wasn't always easy, of course, and while I don't dwell on the details, I don't pretend that it wasn't a strain, but there are so many memories of those years that we treasure. Above all, the day in and day out experiences of my mother's unbowed spirit, which inspired and awed us all. She and her family devised ways to communicate through gestures, annotations, and a few words. She still possessed with she still possessed. Here, come here. She could convey her emotions by clapping and through song. Most surprisingly, my mother proved to be a superb grandmother to my two children, whom she loved without reservation, and who loved her the same way in return. Maclay noted that her grandchildren saw past her disability. They could not have known how they made life worth living for her, but being around her was a joy. After she died, Maclay writes that it took a long time to adjust to the silence in the house. He concluded aging is not a problem to be solved. My mother taught us it is a meaning to be lived out. Sometimes the old and the infirm, those who have been wounded by life and whose choices have been constrained, reveal what is most important in life. Sometimes those whose choices have been limited can demonstrate that by focusing on others and not oneself, life is defined not by options available to us, but by the strength of our commitments. If autonomy-based liberals believe that society works best when it opens up individual options, gift-based liberals believe that society works best when it creates ecologies of care that help people address difficulties all along the path of life. Autonomy-based liberalism is entrenching that apparatus that ends life. Gifts-based liberalism believes in providing varieties of palliative care to those near death and butt resting doctors as they forge trusting relationships with their patients, whose support structures sometimes inhibit choice by declaring certain actions beyond the pale. Doctors are there for healing at all times under all pressures. Patients can trust the doctors because they know the doctors serve life. Doctors can know that exhausted and confused though they might well attending to a patient, their default orientation will be to continue the struggle to save life and not to end life. John Stuart and Harriet Taylor Mill believed in individual autonomy, but they also believed that a just society has a vision not only of freedom, but also of goodness, the right and wrong. Humans, John Stuart Mill wrote, are under a moral obligation to seek the improvement of our moral character. He continued, the test of what is right in politics is not the will of the people, but the good of the people. He understood that the moral obligations we take in life to family obligation, or to family, friends, a nation, to the past, to the future, properly put a brake on individual freedom of action. He believed that they point us toward a fulfillment for our nature, or of our nature. The good of humanity is not some abstraction. It's grounded in the succession of intimates, the institutions that we inherit and that we reform, improve, and then pass on. When a fellow member of the procession is in despair, is suffering, is thinking about ending their life, we don't provide a syringe. We say the world has not stopped asking things of you. You still have gifts to give merely by living amongst us. Your life still sends ripples outwards in ways you do and do not see. Don't go. We need you. We still need you. David Brooks is a contributing writer and The Atlantic and the author of the forthcoming book, How to Know a Person, The Art of Seeing Others Deeply and Being Deeply Seen. Thank you, John Stuart Mill, and thank you to The Atlantic for publishing that.